Telegram on Math. This may be the last episode of all for some. There's other updates actually, which would be great. Sorry,
Fanfiction, unleash your imagination.
I might listen to other tabs though, in the middle of this happening, so sorry about that though, if you were annoyed.
Chapter 60, Tenya Protection Squad. Izuku snuck out of the house with Shoto and Eijiro. They met the car several hundred meters away just to make it harder in case someone tried to follow it after picking up Tenya. The three quickly got in with a somewhat confused Tenya. Izuku had to summarize the night's events before he could lean back and doze off. The workout had helped him wake up, but that did nothing to the fact he had missed even more sleep than usual. Except when his eyes were half closed, they happened to point at Tenya, who was no longer distracted by Izuku's explanations. The taller teen had also been tired, but as he thought they weren't paying as much attention, the darkness snuck onto his face. It started around the eyes and spread as tension on his face. He squeezed his fists. What really made Izuku worried was that tension. He knew it well: anger, suppressed anger, even more than before. Tenya, what happened? Izuku asked, silencing even Eijiro, who had been keeping Shoto distracted. Tenya grimaced. Tensei had another surgery last night, something they missed before. They say it will be okay now, but that is what they said before. His arm shook and Izuku was surprised his nails didn't make his own hand bleed from how hard he was squeezing his fist. Izuku reached out to put his hand on top of it. Shoto and Eijiro soon mimicked the gesture. He didn't deserve this, Tenya said through gritted teeth. The world rarely cares what people deserve, Izuku whispered. We can only do our best to manage with it. The world didn't do this, Tenya muttered more quietly than before. His tone sent chills through Izuku, who had to check Shoto to make sure the other hadn't suddenly decided to play air conditioning again without realizing. The drive continued with a tension in the air that even Eijiro couldn't fully crack. When they picked up Hitachi, the brainwasher took one glance at Tenya and gave Izuku a knowing look. Izuku gave him the summary of the night like Tenya and Tokoyami had gotten, but avoided topics that might have made the tension worse until they got to the school. Walking to the class, Tenya was naturally at the front of the group, so Izuku hung back with Hitachi. You think he will be okay? Izuku asked. It feels worse than before. Probably. I'm not sure if he is feeling worse, or just failing to pretend he's better than he actually is. Neither is good. I'm worried he might do something stupid. You of all of us know people might act without thinking if someone close to them is hurt. Izuku nodded slowly. Tenya might not be as explosive as you. Hitachi tilted his head as he said that, but Izuku gave no opposition. But all that pressure needs to be released somewhere, and I don't think punching Eijiro is going to do it for him. Sorry, the redhead walking in front of them whispered. Izuku could only shake his head before responding. What do you think he is going to do? Rush out to look for Stain alone? I guess he might, but we are talking about Tenya. Even if he is pushed far enough to break the rules, he would approach it in some organized way, and he wouldn't have much time considering he trains with us after school and during weekends. Not that he would be likely to find Stain even if he tried. All of the heroes in the country have not yet done so. That's good, but might frustrate him more. You have really thought about this, Izuku commented. And you haven't? I'm surprised you didn't start muttering as soon as Tenya wasn't listening. With stuff like this, Izuku said, it's better for everyone to leave that to you. No pressure, Hitachi rubbed the back of his neck. Best I can think is to keep a close eye on Tenya while Tensei recovers. He might never be back to normal, but Tenya might be more able to process that once he is out of the hospital and not in actual danger, or at least we can ask for Tensei's help then. So, keep him busy, Izuku muttered. I guess we are going to train later than usual today. Yes, Eijiro cheered semi-quietly. For him, then suddenly looked meek. Sorry. Izuku tilted his head towards Hitachi. Are you sure punching EI therapy wouldn't work? I doubt it, but it shouldn't hurt either, except for his hands. Hitachi shook his own hand as if it was still sore after his most recent session with the walking stone wall. My biggest worry is the internship and how the hero he picks is going to handle him, but that isn't something we can help. Yeah, I'm not even confident about managing our internship. So, are we still going with the best genist? Yeah, Izuku responded. I'm still suspicious, but we can put in our acceptance for his offer today. Besides that, keep an eye on Tinya and Shoto. They're both on the knife's edge in their own ways. I will. When did you switch from Todoroki to Shoto? I think this might be a record time. When he showed up at my door at night with a cold front in tow and was afraid to sleep alone. I see. They entered the classroom for their first class and kept to more common school topics in discussions during the morning. Izuku and Hitachi headed to the teacher's office once the lunch hour started to confirm their internships. Tinya joined them but didn't say anything on the way. Izuku and Hitachi gave Aizawa their picks first. The man looked at the data with tired eyes. Best genist, congratulations. He might actually be able to deal with you too. Izuku rotated his eyes and stepped aside so Tinya could step forward to handle his business. Manual. That is a surprising choice, Aizawa said. A dark feeling crept under Izuku's skin as he felt there was something important about that hero. Are you sure this is your choice? Aizawa asked, sounding calmer, but as suspicious as Izuku. There doesn't seem to be anything in common between him and you, and I am quite confident you had offers from higher rated heroes. I did not choose based on rankings. Those are mostly popularity polls that don't tell if someone is a true hero worth learning from, Tinya responded in a monotonous voice. Izuku would have been so proud of those words if they were said in a different voice at a different time, but now. Aizawa glanced at Izuku while Tinya spoke. Manuel might not be most famous or powerful, but he is a decent hero who helps people. T.E. My brother has worked with him sometimes. Aizawa looked at Tinya long enough in silence to make his student squirm, but eventually he nodded. I'll let him know. Make sure to listen to the heroes you intern with and keep close to them on the field. Yes, of course, Tinya said as Tinya would, except lacking his usual enthusiasm for following rules and orders. He gave a little bow and escaped from the room past Izuku and Hitachi. The former had practically frozen still until Hitachi pulled on Izuku's arm, getting him to move further away from Aizawa. They leaned close to each other to talk, backs towards the teacher. He is planning something, Hitachi whispered. I don't yet know what. I do, Izuku said in shaky voice. Manuel operates in Hosu, that is where Stain was last seen, it's where he maimed Tensei. You were right that Tinya would find an organized way. I see. So what are we going to do? If he does something stupid during the internships, it is difficult for us to do anything, unless we can talk him out of it before then. I doubt that is going to work, Hitachi shook his head. I have never seen Tinya this serious about something or this careless of risk or rules. If we both tried before, I can't see us succeeding this time, especially concerning the situation with Tensei and their family. He might get himself killed, Izuku whispered, feeling cold shadows around his life reaching over himself. Or he might spend his internship chasing shadows. We don't even know if Stain is anywhere near Hosu anymore, let alone interested in students. If only Izuku could have shared Hitachi's conviction. His conviction said that Stain was still very much present in Hosu. That's what Shirakuro was already counting on. Maybe if he could find the killer before the internships. We could see if we could switch to internships that are closer. I think I had an offer or two around there, not sure about yours. Izuku's head perked up and he frowned deep in thought. No, they were all more distant heroes, except. Izuku pulled out his phone and did some quick research. His frown got darker. Maybe Gran Torino. The All Might's old teacher hero, yes, Izuku said with venom in his voice. You shouldn't. No, Izuku said, but it seems I need to. I didn't really care about Genist anyway. You are the one who shouldn't miss the opportunity to intern with a top 10 ranked hero. We were both going to go with him last I checked, and since when do you care about the rankings? I would rather choose an internship where I can help someone. I hope we can if he needs help. Do you think the two of us can do anything? Maybe. At least we can alert more help if we find he is in trouble, though. Though what? Hitachi asked. We should ask the others where they are going. See if we can have more eyes in the area. Right. We should talk to them before they lock in their internships. How about the teachers? If Tinya doesn't listen to us, teachers won't change his mind either. Izuku paused. I can't believe I just said that. He has gotten a bit more relaxed with authority since hanging out with you, Hitachi noted. But you are probably right. At best telling teachers gets them to force him to take a different internship, but that won't improve things overall, and it feels a bit like betraying his trust. There are a lot of things between us that people would think we should tell teachers or someone else. You mean with me, Izuku corrected. Hitachi remained silent. I agree, Izuku said finally, looking at the floor. This was one betrayal he could still choose to not do. I think, we have to keep this within the group. The group, Hitachi muttered. You know, for someone who could barely deal with people, you have attracted quite a. He twisted his mouth looking for the words. Squad around you. You talk like we're a military unit. Will we have already seen battle, and we are planning an escort mission right now? Izuku blinked. Was that a video game reference? Not you too. What do you mean me too? Izuku cursed himself internally and had to tug on calm mind just to not stutter. I knew someone, in the past, who was really into video games and talked about many things like they were in a game. There was several seconds of silence after Izuku's explanation, and every second something squeezed his insides a little harder. Then Hitachi smirked. So, let's go get the tank, the elemental sorcerer, and the guy who can summon a shadow demon, and we got our party ready. We should think about finding a healer to balance out our ranks. Izuku wasn't sure if he should grin or facepalm, so eventually he just nodded slowly. We should change our internships right away before Izawa sends them forward. The duo turned around towards where their teacher was still sitting behind his desk. The headache he was already getting was, by the time they figured out alternative internships and got the more than a little suspicious Izawa to change them, a good chunk of the lunch break had already gone as Izuku and Hitachi reached the table where rest of their adventuring party was finishing their meal next to two empty seats. Well, most of them were finishing. Tinya's plate looked like he had barely started, and he wasn't lecturing to Eijiro, who talked with food in his mouth. Dark shadow popped out of Tokoyama's back as the duo approached. Hey, where have you been? Just sorting out our internships, Hitachi responded. Oh right, you got best genist and got to go together, Eijiro cheered. Well actually. Hitachi started. We changed our picks. Best genist was. Hitachi looked at Tinya. He did so openly, noticed by everyone except Tinya himself, who was staring at his food. Too far. We got better located options. Have you thought about where you will be going? Too far? Eijiro asked. But he is. A single stare from Hitachi silenced the redhead. Now there was a quirk worth calling a superpower. So did you have any really good offers? Fumi did, Dark Shadow responded. He got an offer from some Hawks guy. He is supposed to be some big deal. I don't see why Fumi would need another wingman besides me. Wingman? Hitachi raised his eyebrows. Yeah, I can fly Fumi now. He doesn't need anyone else with wings. Oh, but isn't it still good to intern with a hero that can keep up with you if you can fly? Oh right, I didn't think of that. You might be able to learn some flying tips and tricks. And if there is an emergency somewhere you can both get there quickly to help, Hitachi added. The rest of us would have to be a lot closer to get there in time. Yes, I know I am amazing. How about you Eijiro, too? Shoto. I don't really know, Eijiro said. I got a bunch of offers but I don't really know a lot of details on many heroes. I was thinking of fourth kind. People have called him the chivalrous hero. That sounds right. Of course you would choose based on that, Izuku muttered, but mostly amused rather than judging. Well, I haven't made the final choice yet, Eijiro glanced at Tinya, before returning his eyes to Izuku. At least he was starting to understand there was more at stake in the conversation. After a moment he lightly elbowed Shoto. How about you? I don't know, Shoto responded, giving Izuku a pleading look. I don't know what to do. Don't worry, it is just an internship. You only need to consider what is most useful right now, and what's safe. Whoever you consider, we need to check their relationship with Endeavor. We can talk about it more at a good time, maybe with Eijiro too. Izuku probably has notes on everyone you could consider. I would check those before locking anything in, Hitachi said. Heh, I almost forgot that, Eijiro said. Hey, Tinya, did you pick a hero to intern with yet? Izuku wanted to facepalm. Maybe Eijiro hadn't quite realized the situation from simply a few looks. Yes. I already put in my acceptance to Manuel. Who? He is. He is a hero, not very well known, but decent. Oh, wh-. This time it was Hitachi's turn to elbow Eijiro's side with enough force to catch his attention and silence him. Tinya sighed. Izuku, Hitachi, I can tell what you are doing. You don't need to avoid talking because of me. After everything we've done together things aren't going to change if you get careless with your words. Fine, Izuku said. We know what you are planning, why you opted to intern with Manuel and what you think you can and want to do. Can we talk you out of it? There was a tense moment of silence. No, Tinya finally responded. Then you should know we aren't going to be far. I and Toshi changed out internships to be closer to Hosu. Hopefully you are at least willing to call us if you try to bite off more than you can chew. Tinya looked at him for a moment, but the look Izuku gave back told Tinya convincing Izuku to change his mind was at least as impossible as doing the same to him. He looked at his plate and picked it up. I should go now. Don't want to be late from the lesson and I think I'll need to go to the bathroom before then. Sorry. He left in a hurry. Izuku looked after him until he left the room. Old Izuku might have watered the floor. The shadow over him has grown darker, Tokoyami said. Can we do something to help? Yes, Hitachi said. Welcome to the squad. What squad? Dark Shadow asked. In this case, Hitachi said, the Tinya Protection Squad. In the remaining minutes of the lunch break Hitachi and Izuku somehow managed to explain everything to get everyone on the same page and still finish their food. Eijiro even had them all fist bump together to make their common mission. Unfortunately he also unknowingly stabbed Izuku's heart. Tinya can always trust his friends. They got to class just in time. Tinya was already seated but did not say anything. Izuku squeezed his fists when All Might stepped inside as the heroics teacher of the day, but kept his mouth shut. He didn't even comment on the instruction for the day's combat training. As they got changed into their costumes and headed out Izuku hung back to be behind Tinya. He wasn't going to do anything in the middle of the school day, but Izuku didn't feel like not keeping an eye on him and Shoto too had already dressed into his simple costume. Unfortunately that made Izuku the last to leave the classroom and there was a giant blonde gorilla standing by the door. What? Izuku asked as he walked past, not even turning his head. I have bigger worries than you, if you believe that. Izuku tried to walk away, but they were going to the same place and All Might followed. I heard you accepted Gran Torino's offer after all. I was wondering. Don't, it doesn't work for you. Izuku could feel the large man's frown aimed at the back of his head. Of him, and it has nothing to do with him, or you. Leave me alone. My All Might quota for this decade is already full. Then why? Because there are more important things than you or whatever you are plotting with Gran Torino. It better not get in the way. In the way of what? Izuku actually paused for a moment, but if Tinya wanted All Might's help he would have asked for it. Also, the so-called unbeatable hero had yet to stop the killer. No, Izuku, none of your concern. Don't you have class to teach? Isn't he got Izuku there, and Izuku wanted to tear open his throat. He settled with frowning all the way to the training grounds. They were last to arrive, though most of the class didn't even notice. All of them had grouped together around something. Something was moving on the ground. Izuku peeked past them, trying to forget the large man that stepped next to him, much closer than he really needed to be. On 50. On 50. Eijiro declared, pushing himself to his knees, then up on his feet. Sato and Ajiro followed right after. Hitachi stepped next to a grinning Eijiro and raised an arm like he has just won a boxing tournament. The winner, Hitachi declared. Some of Eijiro's grin must have jumped on Izuku, as his face didn't feel like it was tensing in a frown as it had during the walk. A shadow touched him. He glanced at All Might looking at him, making Izuku instantly scowl. They stared at each other only for a second or two. Hey, Mito bro, what took you so long? Eijiro called and started pushing through the class towards him. You missed the first round of the competition. First round? Izuku asked, smiling. Yeah, first push UPS, then sit UPS and pull UPS, except we don't have a good place for those, so I thought arm wrestling. We usually spend most of the lessons like this watching others go through the exercise, so I thought we could have a little training competition on the side. Of course you did. Always taking the chance to train. Of course. So, want to join the contest? Hitachi is trying to keep score, but he has nothing to take. Izuku had a pen and notebook on his hand. Notes with. Izuku handed them to Hitachi. Just use the last page, and don't show the rest to others or we'll go through your pages in front of the class. His pages? Ashido asked. Hitachi waved the closed notebook in front of her teasingly. First step of getting on Izuku's good side, be someone worth taking notes on. Hitachi opened the notebook and flipped through pages before closing it again. Even if it's not really a high bar to pass, congratulations. Ashido tilted her head, looking confused. Izuku started wondering if it had been a good idea to entrust Hitachi with the power of the notebook, even the most benign and general one with none of the dark knowledge of Shirakuro's notebooks. Ahem, All Might said, calling for attention, we came here for combat training. He looked around the students in front of him. As his eyes got to Izuku, Izuku made sure to turn back towards Eijiro, only being on good enough behavior to somewhat lower his voice. How about this? Whoever in our training group does best in your contest gets a treat, real Wagyu steak, a big one, next weekend. That made Eijiro's smile stretch so much Izuku wondered how his face didn't split. All Might made an increasingly irritated sound, trying to get attention back onto himself. He surely wasn't used to not being the center of attention. Given the situation, even that wasn't enough to bring Izuku's frown back. Make sure to tell others too, or it's not fair, he said before giving the buffoon the attention he so wanted. All Might kept staring at them for a long moment before proceeding with the lesson, though he didn't look just annoyed. In the end the Wageia prize was too much for Eijiro to lose his private tournament, though Izuku and Shoto made it a close call and a few others came close too even without having the opportunity for the prize. Tinya never felt like participating. All Might kept looking at them repeatedly with side eye. The contest attracted more of the students' attention than watching the exercise itself. Hitachi returned the notebook to Izuku with both hands while bowing like he was giving away a holy relic. Izuku did his best to hide his own grimace. As they walked from the training ground of the lesson to the sports field, Izuku was focused on typing on his phone while Hitachi and Eijiro kept the mood up, or tried to in Tinya's case at least. At least Shoto seemed satisfied and happy listening to Eijiro talk about having a rematch later. It was Dark Shadow who paid the most attention to Izuku and stretched out to peek over his shoulder. "What are you writing? Negotiating for a new quirk? For yourself or planning to give it to someone else?" Izuku stopped for a few seconds. The quirk that had been ready to kill him for his quirk might have been the first one to recognize that side of his quirk in such a manner. After the initial rush of happiness, Izuku got a very Hitachi-esque devious smile on his face. "Why are you asking? Worried I'll get Tokoyami something other than you?" "No, that might not be so bad if it helped keep him safe actually. At least you got your priorities clear. So what kind of quirk are you going to?" Hitachi raised his eyebrow. "Since when is that a quirk? If you wanted that you could have just asked me." Izuku shook his head. "It's not like that, but you might get jealous for this. It's a quirk that can stockpile tiredness, almost 3 days worth apparently, so I could stay awake that long before starting to get significantly tired." Hitachi whistled impressed but, after a few seconds of looking at Izuku's face, quickly moved to a frown. "What's the catch?" "Well, it doesn't remove the need for sleep, only delays it, so if I stayed awake for 3 full days I would have to spend one sleeping, or even more actually, though it should help catching up with sleep after a point. Also if I stayed up too long, probably somewhere around 4 days, I would simply collapse and be impossible to wake up for a while, or at least that was the maximum for the current owner." "That sounds amazing," Hitachi said in an almost dreamy voice, "mostly at least. Why does the owner want to sell?" He stared at Izuku and got an even more serious frown than before. "Izuku. He overused the quirk, poor single parent with several children using his quirk to work around the clock. He has already had 2 heart attacks in his 40s, second because he went back to work and using his quirk after the first one. He's trying to get enough money to last until all his kids are adults and finish school. Honestly, I think he would give it away for free since he can't trust himself to not overuse, or even use it at all, again." "Izuku," Hitachi said more somberly, "can you?" That was a question Izuku hadn't thought about much, but Hitachi also didn't know about regeneration. It would probably negate any negative effects from staying up late. "It's okay," Izuku started, "working 4 days straight and collapsing is one thing, but if there is even a risk of a battle, I couldn't risk waiting to reach the limits, and there are likely individual differences. If I keep healthier and fitter the risk should be reduced." Hitachi's face remained on unconvinced setting. Izuku gently elbowed his side trying to break the tension. "You are just jealous and hoping I'd give it to you, aren't you?" Hitachi's stare didn't change. Izuku's shoulders slumped. "Okay. You aren't wrong, but I'm still getting the quirk." Hitachi sighed. "When?" "Today, I'll stop at the hospital on the way home." Izuku paused to look at Tinya. "It is the same hospital where Tensei is. I'm sure Tinya is planning to go there after school anyway. Might have to change plans on that extra long training, unless you want to join EI and Shoto at EI's place." A bunch of red hair bounced up behind them. "Sure, my hands are hurting already." Favorite, story author follow, fanfiction unleash your imagination.
This is not something that me to actually physically do. I'm really pissed. I have to look. I would want to look at that. Yeah, let's see. There was definitely an update for Grassy this month. I don't know when the fuck he's gonna do another one. So last Sunday was the Saturday last week. I don't know if there's gonna be one this Saturday though, so there may be more episodes for this, but you know, that's always speculation though.
Fanfiction, unleash your imagination. Proofread by 3D Phantom. Chapter 61, Meeting the Hunter.
Same, yay.
Shirakuro crouched on the roof of the tallest building in Hosu, scanning the streets below with the help of the zoom quirk. He was taking the chance to practice stabilizing his sights to effectively use the vision quirk, despite the slight nausea of adding a new quirk. The sleep deprived was truly wonderful. The sun had been down for a good while already, but Shirakuro still felt fresh as in the morning. The quirk had even taken away tiredness he had accumulated during the day before getting it, and it was effortless to use. The quirk was nearly automatic. He could choose to not use it, but it was easier not to. No wonder the previous owner ended up overusing it. Feeling like this, it was easy to forget there was even such a thing as need for sleep. The effect was similar to almost forgetting permanence of serious injuries on other people when he had regeneration. If Izuku didn't worry about those around him so much, he might have forgotten that altogether. He blinked and zoomed out before zooming in again on a different place. That was easier than trying to move the spot he was looking at any significant distance while zoomed in. A group of heroes got out of a car in a nearby parking lot and scattered in different directions, some alone, some in pairs. One flew up over the rooftops, causing Shirakuro to duck, but she headed in another direction, leaving rest of the group and Shirakuro behind. He reminded himself to not make the mistake of forgetting to look up as most people do. He still had to check the people below. Doing his best to check each of them, none raised any special familiarity or interest from his research, except. He turned back to one of the heroes, referencing his memories of the heroes in the area. When the man stepped straight under a streetlight, it clicked. Manual, he muttered under his helmet. Do you wish something? Kurojiri asked behind him. I'm going to follow a hero. Let's go to that roof. He pointed at a building down the street. He would have rather stretched his legs and trained with his jets leaping from building to building, but no one could see Shirakuro using that quirk. Also, his control was still limited. He could leap fine but relied solely on his agility to avoid a need for regeneration with any significant height or distance. Instead, he hopped on a little warp gate that looked like a dark puddle on the roof, a puddle with a whirlpool. He landed on the other roof and after a few seconds of reorienting rushed to the edge. He was now ahead of Manuel, who was walking towards him. Shirakuro continued following him, switching between watching him and scanning the surrounding roofs. Mostly the hero just walked around and waved to people that did so to him first. Shirakuro started mentally counting what share of people did so, trying to estimate how these people felt about the man, not that it would describe his true personality. Shirakuro often scanned the alleys Manuel passed in case of familiar faces. He eventually spotted one, but it wasn't one of the ones he was looking. This one made him frown under his helmet. Manuel stopped to chat with Native. They seemed to be friendly. Tinya's chosen internship hero was looking worse moment by moment. They walked together a moment, but a few blocks later stopped by a crossroads, raising their hands in goodbye. Shirakuro froze still for a moment, his eyes darting between the two to the best of his ability at such zoom level. Part of Izuku wanted to keep an eye on Manuel to learn everything he could about the man, but that wasn't Shirakuro's mission here. He leaped between adjacent buildings of the same height to follow Native, the so-called hero he at least knew to be rotten and with at least some people aware of it. If he wanted to discover Stain, he couldn't afford to track every hero individually, hoping they were also rotten in the eyes of the killer. The so-called hero, like most, didn't look up even as Shirakuro was directly above him, and he was alone despite the recent appearance of the hero killer. Such arrogance was nothing new among heroes though. If Shirakuro wanted to kill the man, he felt he would have had a very good chance despite native being pro, even more so if he could have used Izuku's quirks and blasted the man from above. With so many witnesses around on the street, there wasn't even the chance to risk doing so in secret, and that was most important. Shirakuro had even added protection in his gloves and sleeves between the hands and elbows to compensate for lack of dragon blade for defense. They were inspired by Hitashi's arm guards, but much more hidden in the sleeves. Unfortunately, killing the hero would not have solved anything. Native would just have been shown as a martyr and added to the list of dead heroes that mostly consisted of Stain's victims. It would have been yet another hero who did as he pleased and got away with a clean image. Shirakuro forced himself to look away and up, to check nearby roofs again. He focused on one nearby roof in sight of the hero. There was a potentially human-sized form on it. Shirakuro wasn't sure if it had just arrived or if he had not noticed it before. The only reason he did now was because the wind had picked up, blowing around some long strands of fabric or something similar hanging from the form. "Kurojiri, rooftop at 10 o'clock, Shirakuro said and waited a few seconds, during which the form moved away from the edge and out of sight. "I saw it. Do you wish to go to that roof?" "Why?" Shirakuro paused as his thoughts caught up to his mouth. "No, the one next to it that is one story taller, and keep out of sight once I'm there." Quietly a warp gate formed in the air in front of Shirakuro and he dove through. His feet touched the surface of the other roof without a sound. He crouched down before the second foot even touched the roof and rushed to the edge to look down onto the other roof below. This time he relied on his helmet's night vision rather than his quirks, though a night vision or infrared vision quirk would have been handy. Even more so considering even with the helmet's optics there was no sign of anyone on the roof. Shirakuro snuck alongside the roof's edge, scanning every millimeter of the roof and those around it. With the warp gate it had only been seconds from seeing the other person to Shirakuro getting here. He couldn't have gone far, but there was no one in sight and the only sounds came from traffic far below and the blowing of wind that was just calming down. Soon there was just a slight whistle of air moving, and a tap of something soft. The whistle of air got higher, like something was moving through it rapidly. Shirakuro leaned back and down so deep he had to catch himself with his hand as a blade of a sword whizzed through where his neck had been a fraction of a second earlier. He pushed with both his leg and arm to kick at his attacker and immediately flip up. The attacker avoided, but it gave Shirakuro enough time to get on his feet and raise his arm. The sword swung at him again. It impacted his forearm with enough force to even bend the arm guard, causing a small slice to press painfully against his skin. The force of the slash alone might have thrown Shirakuro out of balance had Izuku not regularly taken punches from a walking boulder and occasional rocket-powered kicks. Still, Shirakuro parried the slash and jumped several steps backwards, dodging a second strike. The attacker didn't immediately charge at him, giving Shirakuro the chance to finally really see his opponent. It was a tall muscular man with a dark sleeveless shirt and some kind of bandages wrapped around his arms. The waving fabrics Shirakuro had seen were long ends of a scarf and a fabric mask covering the top of the man's face above. The man had no nose. Also his strangely elongated tongue hung out of his mouth. The minor mutation had to have something to do with his quirk. He raised the sword, pointing it at Shirakuro, who was glad the mask covered his face. He tugged on the calm mind to remain focused and keep his feelings away from his voice. "You are Stain. And you were looking for me, hero." "I was, but Shirakuro started, but Stain's arm twitched. In a fraction of a second a knife appeared in his hand and got thrown towards Shirakuro. It was slower than some of his father's air cannon blasts, but Shirakuro barely avoided it, by which time Stain was already on the move. Shirakuro stepped aside from the slash and struck out towards Stain's arm with an open hand vibration already active. He only barely brushed the sword's handle. Enough of a shockwave passed through the handle to make Stain drop it. The long sword hadn't even touched the roof as Stain swung a smaller but more gruesome-looking blade. Shirakuro tried to pull back in time, but the blade still grazed his arm, finding the gap between the arm guard and reinforcements in his gloves. Shirakuro hissed once as he backed away, but the injury was nothing. The small wound made moving his hand properly more difficult, but would not have taken him out of the fight even if it wasn't already healing. Stain didn't chase after him. The sword clanged once against the roof and bounced a little bit. Stain caught it before it could hit the roof again. He grinned. It wasn't a happy grin, but rather a deranged grin of a sociopath looking at a helpless prey. Like Bakugo, but maybe even a magnitude worse. He licked his lips, raising the small blade in front of his face. Shirakuro felt death peeking over his shoulder. Stain was planning something. He hadn't even shown his quirk yet. Shirakuro couldn't leave initiative to the killer anymore and charged. Venomous nails extended through holes in his gloves. Then Stain licked the blade. Shirakuro lost all feeling in his limbs and fell forward with the momentum of his own attack. Without the helmet he would have broken his nose at the very least. At least the paralysis didn't come with agonizing pain. He tried to tense all of his muscles but could barely control his eyes and mouth. Was this Stain's quirk or did his blades have venom? No, the effect was too sudden, and it happened when Stain had licked the blade. Shirakuro realized it had to have something to do with his blood, but that didn't tell him how the paralysis happened or how to break it. Was it telepathic, a matter of willpower, something blocking his nerve cells from passing signals from his brain to the muscles and back? The lack of feeling suggested so, but then what did blood have to do with it? How long did the effect last and would his blood type influence that? Did it count as an injury he could heal from like venoms and poisons did? A pair of still working feet stood next to his head. Thinking time was over. You are fast and skilled, I acknowledge that, but your fighting is still unrefined. With a little more time you could have been a worthy foe, but it won't save you from being purged like all fake heroes. I am not a hero, Shirakuro managed to finally say. I tried to tell you. I just followed one who I know is rotten to find you. I'm not here to catch you. Stain crouched over him. He was so close. If Shirakuro could only have moved. His brain kept sending orders to his muscles, but they did nothing. Then why were you looking for me? Answer carefully. You will be judged for it. I want to know why you do, what you believe about heroes, but I was also asked to find you. Tomura Shigaraki from the League of Villains wants to meet you. Why would I want to meet him? Does he have any worthy conviction to support? Shirakuro could not give an honest answer the killer would like, and lying could return to haunt him and Tomura once Stain met him. I doubt my words would convince you of that. But you would consider him worth following, considering you are here. That was the question Shirakuro feared. He drew more on the calm mind, nearly forgetting his paraplegic state. I don't work for him. We don't get along that well, he paused. I was told to find you by our sensei. My name is Shirakuro Shigaraki. So, another Shigaraki. Then tell me, what is your conviction? What reason would I have to spare your life? The sword's tip hovered over the roof right next to Shirakuro's head and neck. He still could not move and had to control fear to maintain at least the appearance of calmness. As long as he was helpless, he had to convince the killer, and being a scared kid was not going to help. I think our convictions are similar, but we disagree on what to do about it, he said. You hate heroes, probably not the concept of one, but the reality of too many of the heroes in the current system, whatever your standards for a real hero are. And if this is my conviction, you say you share it? You also think the fake heroes should be purged. Now was the real do or die moment. Not the way you think. Heroes are full of selfish, bigoted, and evil people, and most people either don't see or don't care about it, but simply going around killing them won't help. If anything, it might make things worse. The sword twitched next to his head, but now wasn't the time to stop. Shirakuro had lost the initiative in the fight. He could not afford the same in the talk. I can understand the feeling of wanting some of them be gone, even the desire to kill them, but that is like treating a wound by wiping blood off the floor. The problem with heroes and the whole hero system isn't with individual bad heroes. Stain crouched and brought his face closer. Then what is it with? It is with the whole system, and how people value quirks and people based on their power. If you have a flashy, physically powerful quirk, people believe you will become a hero, or at least successful from a young age. They favor you with support others don't receive and raise you to believe quirks determine people's worth and that your quirk alone will make you successful, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because the people picking who get to be heroes were raised in the same way with the same beliefs. In the end, we get a large share of heroes raised to believe in their own superiority by birth, with all kinds of selfish motives and no judgment of their character. Even if they don't want to be rich and famous, they want to be the best for their own ego's sake, not to help others, and when picking their predecessors never even give a chance to kids they don't believe in from the start, based mostly on their quirk. So why shouldn't I kill all the fake heroes? Because you cannot kill all of them, and even if you could, you are only making them into martyrs. They will be remembered as great heroes who died supposedly trying to save people from a serial killer. Another person with the same beliefs will take their place, and nothing will change, except the survivors might get more extreme after so much death. They will have received the fate they deserve, and a real hero might take their place. You clearly don't have the conviction to do what is needed. Stain stood up and the tip of his sword disappeared from Shirakuro's view. Shirakuro started again to internally yell at his body to move. His toe twitched. His fingernails grew out of his gloves. You have potential and might not be completely blind to the wrongs of this world. Perhaps one day you will also gain the will to do what is needed. Don't, Shirakuro gasped, go anywhere. His arm finally moved and struck forward at Stain's leg. The man's spiky boots were tall, so he had to reach upwards towards the back of his knee. Stain reacted fast, but not fast enough. The nails stabbed into the thick-feeling fabric for just an instant before Stain's leg moved away, then came back down on Shirakuro's hand. Shirakuro grunted as his hand got crushed between the boot and the roof. I gave you the chance. Seems you aren't even as smart as I though. What is this? The pressure on Shirakuro's hand lessened as Stain staggered back and fell on his knees, shaking. Somehow, he had so far managed to avoid falling down completely from the paralysis. Shirakuro got up on one knee, finally able to move again. He laid the broken hand on his other knee as it healed, a bent finger snapping back into place. This, Stain gasped, is not the same quirk as before. His eyes moved to Shirakuro's hand as Shirakuro flexed his now healed fingers to make sure everything worked. What are you? Someone who has been given many gifts. As I said, I do not work for Tamura, and I'm not like him either, in more ways than one. Not like almost anyone else really. He paused to look over the shaking murderer in front of him. The venom's effect might not have been as complete as it had been on Izuku what seemed to have been so long ago, but at least for a moment the killer was helpless. If he died now or just got hurt too badly to do anything for a few weeks, there wouldn't even be the risk of Tinya running into him. Despite all his fears, Izuku had not been this close, this eager to take a life since his last fight with Bakugo. Shirakuro stopped fully holding back the killing intent quirk, allowing his feelings to mix with the quirk. What effect the quirk had on the killer was hard to say as he was already shaking on his knees. But Izuku hesitated. Despite all of the dark feelings, Shirakuro did not move. He had a mission, and he was curious. He wasn't here to do the hero's job. Even if Shirakuro didn't go out of his way to assassinate scum like native, he wasn't about to protect one from Stain either. He sighed and pushed the killing intent quirk back into its box deep within. The venom won't last forever, but perhaps you are more willing to talk now. I won't try to kill you. Hopefully you return the favor once you can move. Stain, still shaking, but not making a sound despite the pain, grinned. You are a strange person. Fine, neither of us shall die here tonight. I will not promise more. What is it you want to say to defend these fake heroes? Nothing. I want to say I agree with you that many heroes and the system that put them in that place is rotten. Not sure if we agree on details of what counts as rotten. One thing we do not agree on is going on a killing spree. You need to do much more to really change anything. At the very least, the rot should be exposed. If enough people learn the truth of enough heroes, they might start asking questions. You think we are going to suddenly have real heroes if people start asking questions? Shirakuro shook his head and spoke more quietly. No, at least not suddenly, but it is the only way. The system won't change if its flaws are not exposed, and the rotten people the system supports won't go anywhere until the whole thing changes. Also, he paused, there are still some real heroes. They just need the opportunities to show it. If you are a simple killer, you might not care about it, but if you really do it because of the flaws you see, then you should also consider how to have them replaced by someone better. Seems like that should be at least half of your conviction. And you think you can do this? I can try. I think I can at least achieve more than your killing spree does if I can expose the actions of the heroes you would only kill. And the Shigaraki you want me to meet. His methods are more similar to yours, and you might be able to help each other in your goals, but I am not convinced you would find common ground in your convictions. You are not trying very hard to be convincing. If I trick you to come with lies, the chances of finding agreement, however low they might be now, will be lost as soon as you meet the truth. Interesting, Stain said and jolted a bit. He started pushing himself up. His movements were still shaky and he was gritting his teeth from the effects of the venom, but he was moving. How are you moving? If you are still feeling pain, it should be paralyzing you. Those who would allow pain to paralyze themselves will not survive in the shadows of this world, Stain said, his voice strained from the effort. You are different from most that lurk in them, at least from most of those who have what it takes to survive. Shirakuro was already back on his feet and a few steps back from the killer, nails extended again. He remained quiet, observing every tiny motion of the man in front of him. That was until the stare broke through even calm mind to make Shirakuro's insides squeeze like the killing intent had been turned around against himself. He remained still. If you think you can talk me out of my mission, you are mistaken, but I can meet the other Shigaraki, with one condition. What is your condition? You. Me. Yes, you. I want you to meet me again. You might lack the will to go far enough, or maybe not. I want to learn more and... He raised his sword he had somehow kept a hold of even while under the venom's influence. I want you to face me again. I want to see the potential I can feel but have yet to witness, even if I have to force it out of you. If you accept this, I will meet the other Shigaraki after a few meetings with you. Assuming you aren't afraid, and survive. There is no point in fighting or training if I hold back. Shirakuro was still processing what he had heard. Had this killer, a killer who had killed dozens of heroes seemingly with nothing but swords and a quirk that only worked after his opponent bled. Had he just offered to train Shirakuro? The man put his sword away with a swing nearly as fast as his attacks. He shifted his weight between his legs, about to move, perhaps leave. I'm not afraid, Shirakuro said, raising the hand Stain had stepped on and flexed the completely uninjured fingers. He pulled his sleeve back enough to demonstrate the cut had already healed. You can't do anything to me that the Nomu I usually train with haven't already done. I'm sure you have heard about the Nomu by now, After the USJ. I have. What is your answer? I am not going to talk all night. I agree to your condition. Sounds interesting, but I expect you to fulfill your side of the bargain soon. Tamura is not a patient person. Stain huffed in disgust and turned away. Then you better be worth meeting him. He stepped to the edge. Shirakuro walked closer. Needless to say, you should not talk about anything you've learned to anyone, he warned. The same applies to you. I have no tolerance to anyone who would help the fake heroes. Come to this roof tomorrow at midnight, and make sure you are rested, Stain replied. Don't worry about that, Shirakuro smirked under his helmet. Then Stain jumped over the edge. Shirakuro waited for a few seconds and then strolled to look over it, not surprised when he saw no sign of the man. He drew a deep breath, then another faster, and turned around to face the comforting dark form of Mist. Time to leave, was all he needed to say before a warp gate opened and he rushed through into the safe solitude of a dark but familiar training room. Shirakuro rushed to a bench on the edge of the room and fell on it. He leaned his elbows on his knees and head on his hands as he began to unwind from the meeting. All of the quirk-covered tension crept up on him. He had met Stain, the real Stain. He had fought the killer. He had had the opportunity to end the killer. Shirakuro knew what he did was the only right choice he could make to complete his mission and learn about someone who saw the same issues he did and actually did something about it, however misguided and brutally he went about it. The helmet around Shirakuro's head started feeling tighter and more oppressing as he gasped for air through its filters. He grabbed the latches holding the helmet in place and started yanking them until he managed to take the helmet off and drop it on the bench next to him. One different choice and Izuku would not have needed to worry about Tinya chasing after a serial killer, the serial killer that had already devastated him and his family even if Tensei was still alive. Shirakuro couldn't just ask Stain to leave a specific student alone if they ever ran into each other. Izuku put his hand on his face to hide the tears that leaked out. The room felt cold on top of being dark and empty, except for Kurojiri, but he remained standing a step away. Someone might have called it a respectful distance, but it felt more like a wide ravine separating them. The watchful gaze of Kurojiri felt safe, but the Nomu's silent guard lacked the feelings and close warmth Izuku needed at the moment, and he didn't have his usual shoulders to lean on, not for Shirakuro's issues. Izuku gestured the walking mist cloud to come closer and leaned against the comforting darkness. Thinner mist flowed off the Nomu, completely covering Izuku. It helped a bit with his getting back control of himself without relying on quirks. It would take time, but he had time. It wasn't like he was going to sleep tonight. Favorite story?
Wait, this mostly like Marines like the last episode, unless this Saturday just prove it. Let's see, 18th. If this Saturday has it, I'll make an episode about that episode. Then we can go for 2 weeks and see if what happens. We might do a new episode, but I do have a thing. Let me check my phone. I have no work for a while, so until Friday. No, it's Saturday. So that's your news. Let me check my phone if we get that thing. Apparently, you guys really want an amplification for the next episode for what I'm making. It most likely may not be a one shot though, unlike Reborn, which is gonna be a one shot, really easy one. I don't know what I'm trying to make. It's harder. We'll make another episode of something else, not for all for some though. So please like, favorite, share, subscribe, and new.